Sabrina Drew's body convulsed as she dropped to the marble floor, champagne glass shattering at her feet. Blood trickled from her nose as Sheriff David Lake cradled her seizing body. "Someone call 911. David screamed, watching his bride struggle for breath. Stella Lake lowered her own untouched glass, a thin smile forming. My son deserved better. How far would a mother go to protect her son from a marriage she disapproved of? What happens when maternal love transforms into deadly possession? If you haven't joined the Guilty Whispers community yet, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to become part of our growing family of true crime enthusiasts. Share your location in the comments below. We love seeing how our stories connect people across the world. Sabrina Drew had grown up in South Phoenix's roughest neighborhood, a place where sirens were as common as birdsong. Her childhood had been marked by instability and trauma. At just 11 years old, she entered the foster care system after her mother's struggle with addiction became too severe for her to care for her children. Sabrina and her younger sister, Tanya, bounced between 6 different foster homes over the next 7 years. Despite the hardships, Sabrina developed a fierce determination. She protected Tanya at every turn, sometimes putting herself in harm's way to shield her sister. This protective instinct culminated in an incident when Sabrina was 16. One of their foster parents had become increasingly inappropriate with Tanya, who was only 14 at the time. When Sabrina caught him cornering her sister in the hallway one night, something inside her snapped. The resulting confrontation left the man with a broken nose and Sabrina with a juvenile record that would later be sealed by the courts. The incident became a turning point for Sabrina. She channeled her anger and protective instincts into something constructive. She excelled in school, earned a scholarship to Arizona State University, and eventually became a social worker dedicated to helping children caught in the same system she had navigated. Her colleagues at Phoenix Family Services often marveled at her ability to connect with the most challenging cases. Teenagers who had been written off by others responded to Sabrina's unique blend of empathy and firm boundaries. "She understands because she's lived it," her supervisor once remarked during a particularly difficult case review. "That's something you can't teach." Sabrina's personal philosophy became evident in the handwritten quote she kept taped to her office computer: "Your past shapes you, but it doesn't define your future." This belief guided both her professional approach and her personal resilience. While many of her peers from similar backgrounds remained trapped in cycles of poverty and trauma, Sabrina had broken free through sheer determination and a refusal to be defined by her circumstances. David Lake came from a world entirely different from Sabrina's. Born into one of Phoenix's most prominent families, he was the son of business mogul Richard Lake and his socialite wife, Stella. Law enforcement ran in the family blood. David's grandfather had been Phoenix's police chief in the 1970s, and his father had served on the city's Public Safety Commission for decades. Despite his privileged upbringing, David developed a genuine desire to serve his community. After graduating from the University of Arizona, he surprised his parents by enrolling in the police academy rather than law school. Over 15 years, David rose through the ranks on merit, eventually running for county sheriff on a platform of community engagement. David first met Sabrina at a community policing initiative targeting youth violence. Their professional relationship quickly revealed their shared passion for community service, though their approaches sometimes differed. David's perspective was shaped by law enforcement, focusing on clear boundaries and consequences, while Sabrina advocated for understanding the root causes of behavior. Their first collaborative meeting had ended in a heated debate about the department's approach to juvenile offenders. "These kids need accountability, not just understanding," David had argued, his voice firm but respectful. Sabrina had leaned forward, eyes flashing with conviction. "And they need someone to believe they're more than their worst mistakes. Consequences without support just creates better criminals." Their colleagues had watched the exchange with interest, surprised to see someone challenge the sheriff so directly. Even more surprising was David's response. Rather than dismissing her concerns, he'd invited Sabrina to help develop a more balanced approach. The resulting youth intervention program became one of the county's most successful initiatives, combining accountability with meaningful support systems. Neither expected their professional relationship to develop into something more, but their connection deepened over months of working together. David found himself looking forward to their meetings, arranging his schedule to ensure he could attend even minor planning sessions if Sabrina would be there. For her part, Sabrina began to see beyond the badge and family name, recognizing David's genuine commitment to service. While David and Sabrina's relationship blossomed, Stella Lake watched with growing concern. After her husband Richard's death 5 years earlier, Stella had maintained an iron grip on the family's fortune and social standing. She saw herself as the guardian of the Lake legacy, with David as its heir. As David's relationship with Sabrina grew serious, Stella's concern escalated to alarm. Most troubling to Stella was Sabrina's apparent disinterest in the Lake family's wealth and status, a quality Stella couldn't comprehend and therefore distrusted completely. When David proposed to Sabrina after 18 months of dating, Stella's concerns transformed into a mission. She hired Marcus Delgado, a private investigator known for his discretion. She instructed him to uncover everything about Sabrina Drew, particularly anything that might dissuade David from marriage. "Leave no stone unturned," Stella told Delgado. "I need to know what she's hiding." Delgado's investigation uncovered Sabrina's sealed juvenile record, her time in foster care, and her family's struggles with poverty. To Stella, this confirmed her worst suspicions. She twisted each discovery to fit her narrative. Sabrina's juvenile incident wasn't protecting her sister but evidence of violent tendencies. Her social work wasn't vocational dedication but a cover for financial ambitions. The wedding planning process became a battleground. The tension peaked during discussions about the prenuptial agreement. While Sabrina readily agreed to basic terms protecting the Lake family assets, she refused clauses giving Stella oversight of certain financial decisions. "I'm marrying David, not his bank account," Sabrina stated during a meeting with the family lawyers. "And certainly not his mother." This defiance confirmed Stella's narrative. In her mind, Sabrina's resistance proved she had designs on the Lake fortune. As the wedding date approached, Stella's thoughts grew darker. If she couldn't prevent the marriage through persuasion or legal means, perhaps more direct intervention was necessary. Late at night, her computer search history filled with phrases like "untraceable poisons" and "natural toxins mimicking heart failure." The engagement party at the Phoenix Country Club marked the beginning of the final descent. Sabrina overheard Stella speaking with one of David's cousins. "She's quite the opportunist," Stella murmured. "A gold-digging charity case who's charmed my son with her sob story." The confrontation that followed was quiet but intense. Sabrina pulled Stella aside to a private corner of the terrace. "I've tried to respect you as David's mother," Sabrina said, her voice controlled. "But I won't tolerate being slandered at my own engagement party." Stella's response was chilling. "My dear, people like you always say that. Yet somehow, they always end up with people like us. Quite the coincidence, isn't it?" David, witnessing the exchange, finally confronted his mother. The resulting argument led to a temporary estrangement. The first serious break in their relationship. For 3 weeks, David refused his mother's calls. The reconciliation attempt came at Stella's initiative. She appeared at David's office with tearful apologies and promises to make peace. "I just want you to be happy," she told him. "If she makes you happy, then I need to accept that." David, relieved at the prospect of harmony, readily agreed. Sabrina, more skeptical but unwilling to stand between mother and son, cautiously accepted Stella's apparent change of heart. The rehearsal dinner at the Arizona Biltmore's Garden restaurant became another showcase of Stella's calculated performance. She gave a seemingly heartfelt speech about welcoming Sabrina to the family, though careful listeners might have caught the subtle undercurrents. What neither David nor Sabrina saw was Stella slipping away from the rehearsal dinner early, making a mysterious phone call in the hotel garden. Is everything prepared exactly as we discussed? She asked. Remember, there can be no mistakes tomorrow. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, the Arizona sky a brilliant blue unmarred by clouds. At the lake estate, Stella displayed an unusual calmness as she prepared for the ceremony. The previous week's tension seemed to have dissipated, replaced by an almost serene demeanor that her household staff found more unsettling than her typical controlling behavior. I'll be handling certain details personally today, she informed the wedding coordinator who arrived at 9 that morning. Some things are too important to delegate. Across town at the hotel, Sabrina prepared with her bridal party. Despite the joyful atmosphere, an undercurrent of anxiety followed her throughout the morning preparations. As her maid of honor arranged her veil, Sabrina confided her lingering concerns. Stella's sudden change feels too convenient, she said quietly, away from the other bridesmaids. 6 months of hostility doesn't disappear overnight. Meanwhile, David called his mother from his suite, relieved at her supportive tone. Everything will be perfect today, Stella promised him. I've made sure of it. What David didn't know was that immediately after their call, Stella visited the hotel kitchen under the pretense of checking reception details. The head chef, honored by the personal attention from such a prominent Phoenix socialite, gave her a complete tour of the preparations. Stella showed particular interest in the champagne setup for the toast, asking detailed questions about which glasses would be used for the bride and groom. They should have something special, she insisted. Perhaps these crystal flutes set aside? And I'd like to personally ensure they're properly prepared. Back in her hotel room, Stella removed a small unmarked vial from her purse, studying it in the light from the window. The clear liquid inside caught the sunlight, appearing no different from water. She carefully transferred the contents into an eyedropper concealed in her makeup compact, ensuring she could precisely control the dosage when the time came. The wedding itself took place in the Arizona Biltmore's magnificent gardens. Rows of white chairs flanked a flower-covered aisle leading to an archway entwined with desert blooms. The 400 guests represented the merging worlds of bride and groom. David's colleagues from law enforcement, Stella's social connections, and Sabrina's community of social workers and former foster youth she had mentored. Throughout the ceremony, Stella maintained her composure in the front row, though her eyes remained cold and calculating. She clutched her purse tightly on her lap, one hand occasionally dipping inside to touch the compact, as if confirming its presence. Michael Grant, David's best man and fellow officer, noticed Stella's strange demeanor during the ceremony. She kept checking her purse, he would later tell investigators. And her expression when they kissed, it wasn't a mother watching her son get married. It was something else entirely. Something cold. As the ceremony concluded and guests moved toward the ballroom for the reception, Tanya approached David with growing concern. Something feels wrong, she whispered. Your mother. She's been too accommodating after fighting this for so long. David squeezed her shoulder reassuringly. She's finally accepted us. Let's just enjoy the day. The ballroom had been transformed into an elegant reception space with crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow over tables adorned with exotic flower arrangements. A live band played softly as guests found their seats for dinner. The head table on a slightly raised platform offered the bride and groom a view of the entire celebration. As the reception began, Stella insisted on handling certain elements personally, particularly the champagne toast arrangements. The wedding coordinator, who had been meticulously managing every detail, found herself politely but firmly dismissed from this portion of the preparations. Family tradition, Stella explained with a tight smile. The mother of the groom must oversee the first toast personally. It's been this way for generations. During this time, Stella disappeared briefly, returning just as guests were being seated for dinner. A security camera later reviewed by investigators captured grainy footage of her near the champagne table, her back to the camera as she handled something on the serving tray. The footage showed her precise movements as she carefully applied the eyedropper's contents to the rim of a specific crystal flute, then wiped the edge with a napkin to remove any visible residue. As dinner concluded, the traditional toasts were scheduled to begin. The printed program indicated the best man would offer the first toast, followed by the maid of honor. However, Stella approached the band leader during the final dinner course, requesting a change to the schedule. "I'd like to offer the first toast to my son and new daughter-in-law," she announced, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "It's important to me to welcome Sabrina properly into our family." When he announced Stella Lake would give the first toast, Sabrina felt a sudden wave of panic as she watched her mother-in-law approach with a server carrying a tray of champagne flutes. Something about Stella's expression, a mixture of determination and triumph, sent a chill through Sabrina's body. Stella took the microphone with practiced ease, her voice steady and warm as she addressed the gathering. She began with seemingly affectionate reminiscences about David's childhood, stories that painted him as a principled boy who grew into an honorable man. The guests smiled and nodded, many assuming the earlier tensions had indeed been resolved. "My son has always valued truth and justice above all else," Stella continued, her tone shifting subtly. "His commitment to these principles guides his work as our sheriff and his personal life. Which is why I feel compelled, out of maternal duty and love, to ensure his marriage begins with complete honesty." The atmosphere in the room changed, confusion rippling through the guests as Stella's speech took an unexpected turn. Guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, some shifting nervously in their seats. An elderly aunt at a nearby table gasped audibly, while David's colleagues from the sheriff's department straightened in their chairs, their postures suddenly alert and professional despite their formal attire. "I've discovered some concerning truths about the woman my son has chosen," Stella announced, her voice hardening. "Information that David himself may not be fully aware of." What followed was a calculated public humiliation. Stella revealed distorted versions of the information her private investigator had uncovered. Sabrina's sealed juvenile record presented without context, her family's struggles with addiction framed as hereditary moral failings, her social work career characterized as a calculated stepping stone to access influential people. But perhaps most concerning, Stella continued, her voice dropping to ensure the audience leaned forward to catch every word, "is the pattern I've observed. A young woman from difficult circumstances, positioning herself to access our family's resources while refusing reasonable protections in the prenuptial agreement. The conclusion seems unfortunately clear." David stood abruptly. "Mother, that's enough." Stella ignored him, raising her glass. "I believe I'm saving my son from a terrible mistake. I invite everyone to drink with me, to the truth finally coming to light." Servers had distributed champagne throughout the room during her speech. Stella personally handed glasses to David and Sabrina, insisting they take specific crystal flutes from the tray. "A special vintage," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "For the special couple." The pressure of hundreds of eyes on them was palpable. David, torn between public scandal and confrontation, hesitated. Sabrina, determined not to give Stella the satisfaction of appearing affected by the accusations, raised her glass in defiant response. As she brought the flute to her lips, Sabrina detected an unusual scent beneath the champagne's effervescence, something bitter, reminiscent of almonds. She hesitated for a fraction of a second before taking a small sip, the liquid burning unexpectedly against her throat. David drank from his own glass, unaware of any danger, the bubbles tickling his nose as he quickly set it down to address the situation. "This is neither the time nor place," he said firmly to his mother. "We'll discuss this privately." But Sabrina was already feeling the effects. Her skin flushed crimson, the delicate silk of her wedding dress suddenly damp with sweat. A metallic taste flooded her mouth as her vision began to blur at the edges. She gripped the table, trying to steady herself as the room seemed to tilt around her. "David," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Something's wrong." The change came rapidly. Sabrina's breathing became audibly labored, each inhale a struggle that caught the attention of nearby guests. Her hands trembled violently, causing her to drop her napkin. When she looked up at David, her pupils had dilated so extensively that her eyes appeared almost black. "I can't," she gasped, rising unsteadily from her chair. "I can't breathe." The collapse happened with horrifying swiftness. Sabrina's knees buckled, her body crumpling toward the floor. The sickening crack of bone against marble echoed through the suddenly silent ballroom as her champagne glass shattered, sending glittering shards across the white floor. David lunged to catch her, but was only able to break part of her fall, cradling her convulsing body as she went down. "Someone call 911. David screamed, his training momentarily overcome by personal terror. "She needs help now." The ballroom erupted in chaos. Guests screamed and scrambled, knocking over chairs and tables in their panic. First responders, who had been off-duty guests at the wedding, pushed through the crowd. Sabrina gasped desperately for air, her eyes wide with terror. David held her, tears streaming down his face, whispering promises that everything would be okay. For one brief moment, their eyes met, a final connection, before the light in hers began to fade. Through the commotion, Stella remained standing, observing with detached interest. She set her own untouched champagne glass carefully on the table, stepping back as emergency medical technicians pushed through the crowd. The harsh click of her heels against marble provided a rhythmic counterpoint to the surrounding chaos. "My son deserved better," she murmured, though few heard her amid the crisis unfolding. David performed CPR on the ballroom floor, his training taking over despite his emotional devastation. His hands moved mechanically over Sabrina's chest, pressing in the rhythm he'd used countless times in his career, but never on someone he loved. Sabrina's sister pushed through the crowd, dropping to her knees beside them, a raw, primal scream tearing from her throat as she saw her sister's condition. The sharp scent of spilled champagne mixed with the heavier smell of panic-induced sweat. Sabrina's blood from a cut where her head had struck the floor began to trickle onto David's pristine white shirt and jacket sleeves, the crimson stain spreading across the fabric. Paramedics arrived within minutes, the wail of approaching sirens cutting through the wedding music still playing incongruously in the background. Their voices were clipped and urgent as they took over from David, their equipment clattering against the marble floor as they worked. The tearing sound of Sabrina's wedding dress being cut away for defibrillator access seemed obscenely loud in the hushed room. "Stay with me," David pleaded, his trembling hands leaving smudges of Sabrina's blood on the white emergency blanket the paramedics had spread beneath her. "Please, baby, stay with me." The harsh chemical smell of medical supplies contrasted with the lingering scent of wedding flowers as paramedics loaded Sabrina onto a stretcher. David climbed into the ambulance behind them, clutching Sabrina's cold, limp hand. Her wedding ring caught the light with each turn of the vehicle, a cruel reminder of promises just made and now threatened. At the hospital, the rhythmic, mechanical pumping of continued CPR efforts contrasted with the organic chaos of the emergency room. Medical equipment beeped in irregular patterns as doctors worked desperately to counter the unknown toxin. Despite their efforts, Sabrina's condition deteriorated rapidly. The hollow sound of the flatline and the medical team's voices suddenly dropping to whispers marked the moment hope was lost. "Time of death, 9:47 p.m., the doctor announced quietly. David stood frozen, an empty, cavernous feeling spreading through his chest as he processed the words. His wedding ring felt suddenly heavy and foreign against his skin, the weight of it nearly unbearable. In the span of hours, he had become both husband and widower. Back at the reception venue, the ballroom had transformed into a crime scene. Police officers, many of whom had been wedding guests still in formal attire, secured the area. Champagne glasses were preserved under plastic evidence bags, the liquid still bubbling faintly inside some of them. Wedding guests huddled in shocked clusters in the lobby, their whispers like rustling leaves as theories spread. The chemical smell of fingerprint dust being applied to selected glasses and surfaces pervaded the space as crime scene technicians methodically processed evidence. In the midst of this activity, Stella sat perfectly poised on a chair near the entrance, her posture unnaturally rigid. The contrast between her pristine appearance and the disheveled state of everyone else was striking, not a hair out of place, her makeup immaculate, her expression composed. When David returned to the ballroom, his wedding attire stained with his bride's blood, the sleeves darkening as it dried, the weight of dozens of eyes followed him across the room. Their gazes were heavy with pity and confusion. Camera flashes periodically illuminated the crime scene with harsh, revealing light as evidence was documented. "David, darling," Stella called out, her voice cutting through the room with unnatural calm. "This is a terrible tragedy. She must have had some condition no one knew about. These things happen sometimes, even to the young." David stopped, turning slowly toward his mother. For the first time, he noticed the detail that would crack the case wide open: Stella's champagne glass, set carefully on the table beside her, completely untouched. The sickening realization dawned in his eyes as he looked from the glass to his mother's composed face. "Detective Jackson," David called, his voice hollow. "I need you to take lead on this investigation. Secure all champagne glasses, particularly those at the head table." Detective Terrell Jackson, David's best friend since police academy and his best man, immediately recognized the significance of the request. As sheriff, David would normally oversee any major investigation in his jurisdiction. His immediate recusal spoke volumes. "Consider it done," Jackson replied, already signaling to evidence technicians. "We'll handle everything by the book." The medical examiner's initial findings came back within 48 hours. Traces of a rare plant-based poison had been found in Sabrina's system. The toxin, derived from a plant not native to Arizona, caused rapid neurological breakdown and respiratory failure. Gas chromatography mass spectrometry analysis identified the compound as a cardiotoxic glycoside, known for its bitter almond odor and deadly efficiency. The specific concentration found in Sabrina's bloodstream indicated a precisely calculated dose, enough to be lethal but not so much as to cause immediate collapse that might have prevented ingestion. Forensic analysis of the champagne glasses revealed tampering with Sabrina's glass, microscopic scratches inside the rim consistent with something being applied. Luminol testing showed trace blood residue where her lips had touched the glass, along with a faint fluorescent ring indicating where the poison had been applied. With enough preliminary evidence to proceed, Detective Jackson obtained a search warrant for Stella's home and personal effects. The search revealed a disturbing pattern of obsession. Hidden in Stella's home office, investigators discovered a locked drawer containing a diary outlining her growing concerns about Sabrina and her determination to protect the Lake family legacy from an obvious gold digger. Entries became increasingly disturbing as the wedding date approached. David refuses to see reason. "If legal means won't prevent this disaster, I must consider alternatives. The Lake family has survived for generations by doing what's necessary to protect our interests. I won't be the one who fails in this duty." Stella's computer revealed months of research on untraceable poisons, particularly those derived from exotic plants. Her search history included specific queries about symptoms, detection methods, and acquisition. Financial records showed unusual transactions to an offshore account, followed by a package delivery from a South American botanical supplier 3 weeks before the wedding. Marcus Delgado, the private investigator Stella had hired, came forward voluntarily after learning of Sabrina's death. He provided his complete file and recordings of his conversations with Stella. "She wanted dirt, but what I found was just a kid who'd overcome incredible odds," he told Detective Jackson. "When I reported that Sabrina seemed legitimate, actually in love with her son and not interested in the money, Ms. Lake became angry. Said I wasn't looking hard enough, that everyone has secrets. I should have realized how desperate she was getting." As the investigation proceeded, the truth about Sabrina emerged in stark contrast to Stella's accusations. Her juvenile record, when examined in context, revealed not a violent individual but a protective sister defending her younger sibling from abuse. Financial records showed no evidence of extravagant spending or attempts to access Lake family resources. In fact, Sabrina had established college funds for at-risk youth using her own modest salary, sometimes contributing as much as 25% of her income. For David, the investigation created an excruciating parallel process to his grief. While mourning the wife he had barely begun a life with, he was forced to confront the truth about his mother, a truth that destroyed not only his present but rewrote his understanding of his past. How many of his previous relationships had Stella sabotaged? How many life choices had been subtly manipulated by her controlling influence? 3 weeks after Sabrina's death, with the evidence mounting, David made the most painful decision of his life. He personally drove to his childhood home to confront and arrest his mother. Stella received him in the living room, seated calmly as though expecting a normal visit. "You've come to your senses, then," she said as he entered. Ready to move forward from this unfortunate chapter. David remained standing, his sheriff's badge a shield against his emotional turmoil. "I've come to ask you one question before I do what needs to be done." "Why?" "Because I love you," Stella answered without hesitation. "She would have ruined everything we've built. Our family name, our position, everything your father and I worked for. She wasn't one of us, David. She could never understand our world." "She was my world," David replied quietly. "And you took her from me." The moment of placing handcuffs on his mother's wrists would haunt David for years afterward, the cold metal closing around the hands that had once comforted his childhood fears, the formal recitation of rites to the woman who had taught him to read. Stella's expression never changed, her composure never faltered. Even as officers led her from the home, she maintained her conviction that she had acted to protect her son. The grand jury indictment came swiftly. Stella Lake was charged with first-degree murder with special circumstances of premeditation and poison. The case became a media sensation, dubbed the "Sheriff's Mother Murder Case" by national outlets. The contrast made for irresistible headlines, the county's top law enforcement officer arresting his socialite mother for murdering his bride at their wedding reception. Throughout the legal proceedings, Stella refused to show remorse. Her defense team initially pursued an insanity plea, arguing that grief over losing her son to an unsuitable marriage had triggered a psychological break. This strategy collapsed when prosecutors presented her meticulous research into poisons and financial transactions. Expert testimony revealed the calculated nature of the poisoning. Forensic toxicologists demonstrated how the poison would have been undetectable to Sabrina until too late, explaining how the concentration found in her blood indicated expert knowledge of dosage. Digital forensics experts presented a timeline of Stella's research, showing the progression from general searches about untraceable poisons to specific information about the exact toxin used. Dr. Eleanor Chen, the state's leading toxicologist, explained to the jury how the poison worked. This particular compound attacks the central nervous system first, causing the initial symptoms Ms. Drew experienced: dizziness, racing heart, confusion. Then it progresses to the respiratory system, making breathing increasingly difficult. The victim remains conscious through most of this process, fully aware of what's happening but unable to communicate or help themselves. "It is," she concluded quietly, "an exceptionally cruel way to die." The prosecution also called the hotel bartender who had interacted with Stella before the reception. "She was very specific about which glasses were to be used for the bride and groom," he testified. "She said it was a family tradition, but something about her manner made me uncomfortable. She seemed too interested in which glass would go to which person." Throughout the trial, David sat in the courtroom daily, his face a mask of grief and determination. He watched as the mother he had known his entire life was revealed to be someone capable of calculating, cold-blooded murder. Several times during particularly difficult testimony, he would close his eyes briefly, as if trying to reconcile the mother he remembered from childhood with the woman revealed in court. The jury deliberation lasted just 6 hours before reaching a unanimous verdict: guilty of first-degree murder with special circumstances. "I did what any mother would do to protect her child," Stella said at sentencing, standing proud. "I regret only that my son cannot see I acted out of love." The judge's response was scathing: "You did not protect your son, you stole from him the woman he chose to build his life with. You did not act out of love, but out of control." Stella Lake received life imprisonment without parole. As she was led away, she looked at David one final time. He did not return her gaze. In the aftermath, David established the Sabrina Drew Foundation for At-Risk Youth. "My wife believed in second chances because she lived one," David explained at the launch. The foundation focused on teenagers aging out of foster care, providing scholarships and mentorship. The foundation quickly gained support from both law enforcement and social services, bridging the gap between systems that too often failed to communicate effectively. David leveraged his position and family connections to secure substantial funding, ensuring the foundation could make a meaningful difference. The first initiative created a transitional housing program for foster youth turning 18, providing not just shelter but comprehensive support services to help them establish independent lives. Sabrina used to say that the hardest day for many foster kids wasn't when they entered the system, but when they aged out with nowhere to go, David explained at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the first residence hall. This program ensures they don't face that day alone. Each resident received career counseling, financial literacy training, and ongoing mental health support, resources Sabrina had identified as critical gaps in the existing system. The foundation also established a scholarship fund specifically for former foster youth pursuing careers in social work, law enforcement, or other public service fields. "This is how we honor her legacy," David told reporters. "Not through vengeance or bitterness, but by creating the change she fought for." Every young person who finds stability through these programs carries forward a piece of Sabrina's spirit. 6 months later, David visited his mother in prison. "I wanted to understand," he said when Stella asked why he had come. "You'll understand someday," she replied. "When the pain fades, you'll see I saved you from a lifetime of regret." "Our family no longer includes you," David interrupted. "I came hoping to find remorse. I see now that was foolish." He never visited again. 1 year after Sabrina's death, David organized a memorial service at the community center where she had worked. Unlike the lavish wedding that ended in tragedy, this gathering was simple and meaningful. The first graduates of the Sabrina Drew Scholarship Program spoke about how her foundation had changed their lives. David reflected on his journey. "When I lost Sabrina, I thought my life was over. But she taught me that resilience means building something new from what remains." As twilight fell, David visited her grave alone. The simple headstone bore the words, "Her compassion changed lives." "I'm learning to live in a world without you," he whispered, placing a rose on her grave. "But I'm trying to build one you would have been proud of." In the years that followed, David rebuilt his life, not replacing what was lost but creating something new that honored Sabrina's memory. For those who knew them, the story was not about how she died but how she had lived, transforming her difficult past into a force for positive change. If you haven't joined the Guilty Whispers community yet, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to become part of our growing family of true crime enthusiasts. Share your location in the comments below. We love seeing how our stories connect people across the world. The truth behind closed doors can only come to light when we have the courage to share it. If this story moved you, help others discover it by sharing this video. Leave a like so others can see this story and gain awareness. And don't forget to subscribe to Guilty Whispers. Together, we can ensure that stories like Sabrina's are never forgotten and that justice finds its voice.